Hello and welcome back to the channel, everyone. Welcome back to New Vegas, where today we're going to be taking a look at a fairly iconic weapon in New Vegas. We're going to be taking a look at the Red Glare. This is one of the signature weapons of the Divide. However, you can get multiple versions of it, so it's not necessarily a unique weapon, but it is definitely a very interesting weapon. So the Red Glare, you can find in the Divide. You can find it just laying around. Sometimes the marked men have it. You can also find ammo for this just laying around. It is the only weapon that takes rockets. So if you find a rocket canister, you can pick that up and you'll get ammo for it. There is also a couple different ammo types for the rockets. So the Red Glare requires 100 explosives and 6 strength to wield. The strength actually isn't very high for an explosives weapon, especially like a big two-handed weapon like this. The explosives are very high, but that kind of makes sense since this is usually like an end game weapon, or the Lonesome Road is like the end game DLC, so would make sense to have a very high explosives requirement on this. This one does 20 damage on direct impact from the rockets, and then it does an additional 40 on the explosion. That can be pretty good. This makes it so it doesn't do too much damage, but it still does a decent amount, and explosives always have a high chance of crippling, so that can be pretty good. This weapon I find akin to something like the explosive APW, or the 25mm APW, where it works kind of well as a general purpose weapon, because this weapon doesn't actually have that high of explosive damage on it, so you're less likely to kill yourself with it than other explosive weapons, which is actually pretty good. This one does a whopping 240 damage per second. That can actually be upped quite a bit with different perks, so really good damage per second. This one does shoot quite fast. This one for crit damage is a big old 0, like most explosive weapons, and has a 0 crit chance, so you can't hit crits with this whatsoever. I guess you could with sneak crits, but they still don't do anything extra because they don't do any extra damage on them. That's not too surprising though. Explosives generally aren't that good with crits, and most of the time there's a few that are okay with them, but you shouldn't really be building crits if you're going with a primarily explosives build. This one costs 25 action points using VATS, which isn't very high for an explosive weapon, and it makes it fairly usable. And this weapon, I would actually recommend that you use it in VATS, because this one doesn't have very much friendly fire damage, so you're less likely to accidentally blow yourself up with this as opposed to something like a missile launcher or a grenade rifle or something. The Red Glare can actually be used in VATS perfectly fine. This has pretty low spread at 0.5. That's not bad for an explosive weapon, especially since you don't need to direct impact something. You can if you want, but you don't need to. You just gotta hit close enough, so accuracy is good. This holds 13 rounds in it, which is kind of a weird amount. I don't know why they chose 13, but it's okay. This weighs 20 weight, so it is quite hefty. If you get heavyweight, that cuts it in half to 10, so it's not as bad. The rockets can be a little bit of weight too. They're not as heavy as like missiles are, and you can convert missiles into rockets, which is pretty awesome. But they can also weigh you down a little bit, so something like Pack Rat might be worth taking too for this. And then this weapon has 450 item health, which is quite a lot for an explosive weapon. This is a fully automatic explosive weapon, so it kind of makes sense to give it more health. But even so, I've never really felt like the Red Glares break that quick. No matter how much I've been using them, I feel like it takes quite a while to actually break these. For the general pros of the Red Glare, this one does do really high damage per second, which is fantastic for killing things. It has great ammo. You actually find quite a lot of rockets. You can convert missiles to rockets. There's a couple different rocket ammos that you can use. They're fairly easy to get once you've been to the Divide, so that's pretty nice. And this has very low self-damage. You can actually be shooting this at almost point-blank range and you won't be killing yourself, unlike almost every other explosive weapon. So the Red Glare is very forgiving, especially if you're uncomfortable using explosive weapons in New Vegas, or if you don't quite trust yourself with the explosion radius of explosives. Red Glare might be a really good option for you. For the cons of this weapon though, is that it is quite rare. You do have to go to the Divide to get it. You can buy these from vendors, but it's going to be really expensive to buy them. Same way they can be very expensive to buy their ammo, so you might need a lot of caps. However, if you're in the Divide, you're probably towards the end game and you probably have a lot of money, so that might not be such a big deal. And this weapon is quite heavy. Like most of the big two-handed explosive weapons, this one's going to weigh a lot. Heavyweight can cut that down to 10. There is quite a few other perks that help too, besides like heavyweight and Pack Rat. You could go with something like splash damage and have a bigger explosion radius. That's actually not too bad for the Red Glare, since its explosion radius is kind of small and the friendly fire damage isn't that bad. So if you want to be using this as like your primary weapon, not a terrible option. Demo Expert gives you way more damage, so you probably always want to take that. Hit the Deck really mitigates the damage that you do to yourself with this. So if you take Hit the Deck, then you're probably not going to really see yourself getting hurt at all with the Red Glare if you're using it even at point blank range. You can still potentially cripple your limbs, because regular health damage and limb damage aren't really calculated the same. But even then, maybe not, because it doesn't break your limbs that fast. All of those are pretty awesome options for the Red Glare. I'm not really sure if like Heave Ho works with the Red Glare either. If it does, then that's cool. It just makes it so the rocket is faster, but the rocket already shoots pretty quick, and there's actually a mod to get it even more rate of fire. We'll talk about that in a second, though. There is 3 different rockets that you can load into the red glare. You have the standard rockets. These ones just do regular damage, have a regular explosion radius. Nothing too crazy, but they're probably the ones that you're going to be using the most often, so that's pretty nice. You have incendiary rockets. These ones make it so you do 25% less damage. However, you do 2 damage on the burn from the enemy, and then this ticks for 8 seconds. So you can potentially get a little bit more DPS, depending on the enemy type that you're hitting. I don't usually use the incendiary rockets. I usually stick with the regular ones. Or I go with the high explosive rockets, which is your third option. These get you 35% more damage and give you a bigger AoE. They also don't come with any sort of downside, especially since the AoE doesn't really matter, like we've talked about, even in friendly fire range. So if you can load in high explosive rockets, I'd recommend you do that. If not, the regular rockets would be perfectly fine for this. For an overall rating for the red glare, I'd probably put this thing all the way up into A tier. It's really good as a general purpose weapon. Again, I wouldn't put it quite as high as like the APW, because I think that option is a little bit better for what you're kind of looking for. It's a little bit more lightweight, it's a little bit more handy, it's got a couple more options in terms of ammo. Mods on it really help too. I think that makes for a better general purpose explosive weapon, but the red glare is also really high up there for a good general purpose explosive weapon. Let's talk about the modded version of the red glare now, because you can put 3 mods onto this, and they do change it up at least a little bit. So we've got the red glare alpha strike. This one makes it so your rockets move at 200% more speed. This one I really enjoy. This one is really good. It just makes it so it's easier to hit enemies at a distance, or enemies that are running and kind of zigzagging a little bit more. You can hit them even easier with the red glare, so that one's probably my favorite one, although it's not entirely necessary for the red glare. You have the auto launcher. This increases the rate of fire by 25%. Also quite good. I like that quite a bit. Makes it so you can kill things just a little bit quicker. And then you also have the far sighting, which increases the zoom. So then you have about a 4.5 times zoom when you're aiming down the sights with this, which is a little bit weird. I don't think that the red glare really needs that, but you can put it on. Also, if you put on all of these onto the red glare, you actually get an achievement too. So you probably want to do that, although these are all going to be extremely expensive for the red glare. They cost a lot of caps to get them, and you do have to buy them in the divide from any of the commissaries there. With all these on the red glare, I actually don't think I would change it at all. It's just nice quality of life improvements to the red glare. I think I just put it higher up into A tier, bordering on S tier. I think it's really good, but I don't think it's, again, quite as good as some other explosive weapons. I think there's other general purpose explosive weapons that work a little bit better than the red glare, like the explosive APW and something like Thump Thump. But if you want to take it as a general purpose weapon, it's not that much weaker than those 2 options. And if you want to take it as like a heavy hitting explosive option, it's still decent. Maybe not the highest, maybe not as much as like a missile launcher, but still quite decent overall. So tell me your thoughts on the red glare. How do you enjoy using it? Do you enjoy using it? Do you use it all? I'd really be interested. And how do you like using it? Do you use it as a general purpose weapon, or do you use it as more of like a heavy hitting weapon? Tell me that down below. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll talk to you next time. Till then, stay cool and take care, everybody. Bye-bye.